And welcome back to another episode of Coaching with the Bible. I hope you're doing great. I hope you had an awesome week. This is season 3, episode 39, episode 148. Portion of the week is the double portion known as 𝘊𝘳𝘦𝘴. It is the completion this week of the 4th book of the 5 books of Moses. As I said to you before, this is then the 3rd time together that we are completing this book together, which is exciting, which means we have 1 volume left, the last book, the book of Deuteronomy, which will begin next week. And our topic this week is giving credit. It's an important topic, I think. I think it's one that's overlooked. I think in a society that we live in where people are very much me-focused, I-focused, and not we-focused or us-focused, that too often the credit that is deserved is not given. The person who deserves to receive it doesn't actually receive it. Rabbi Sachs, in I believe the last of his philosophy books called Morality, talks about a cultural climate change. And one of the things that he talks about in that section, one of the early sections of the cultural climate change, is the language, the words that people use, and the shift to I from we. And that the language that people use most regularly when they're talking about anything is about their own involvement, their own accomplishment. That is a shift away from, let's say, communal language to more individual and singular language. And that has had a rotting effect and a corrupting effect on society at large. And so I wanted to dive in here because I think it's an important thing when we talk a lot in Coaching with the Bible about leadership. Really important to zero in and to zoom in on one of the very foundational pieces of being a great leader is pinpointing and acknowledging the credit that people deserve for the work that they've done, for the impact that they've had, the success that they have brought. And that too often it's either assumed or goes unnoticed or goes most likely unacknowledged. And then we have a real situation on our hands, a real crisis on our hands for those individuals. Harry Truman is famous for having said, "It is amazing what you can accomplish if you do not care who gets the credit." That's certainly true. When credit is removed from the equation, it's simply just the accomplishment, the impact, the success, then like so many more things can get done. And if we don't worry about getting credit, or we don't worry about the fact that someone else is giving us credit or not giving us credit, let's say, for something, then there's a world of opportunity that's out there. That said, it is important still to A, on occasion, give yourself a little bit of credit, and B, perhaps more importantly, to be mindful and paying attention to when other people deserve credit for the work that's done. So how does this come up? Where does this come up in the Bible this week? It's actually not obvious, I would say, but it's the following. The story is told in this week's portion about the war that the people of Israel fight against the Midianites. It's sort of a revenge war, taking out vengeance against the Midianites after what has happened over the last couple of weeks. The number of people that have sinned, the number of people that have died in a plague through the actions and the activities brought about from the Midianites, and God commands them to take revenge. And so they do. And in going out to war, they send 12,000 soldiers to war. So it's 1,000 from each of the tribes, including the tribe of Levi. Every single tribe goes out, and they go to war, and they win the war, and a lot of people die in that war from the Midianite nation. And they bring back the spoils of war. When they bring back the spoils of war then split between those that went to war and those that did not go to war. Between those who fought the battle on the battlefield, the physical battle, and those who, let's say, fought a spiritual battle. It's brought down in some of the midrashic exegetical literature about the idea that for every soldier that went to war, there was a quote-unquote soldier that was sitting and studying Torah, Bible, the Word of God, at the same time. And so they are somehow connected, soldier for soldier. And so even though a person didn't take up arms in the physical sense, they participated in some way. By virtue of participating in that way, they also get credit. That's where it comes up. They get credit for the victory. And how do we know that they get credit? How do we see that they get credit? Because they get to partake of the spoils of war. And so giving credit only to the soldiers that went out to battle, to the battlefield and fought the war there would be removing or diminishing or ignoring the role, responsibility, accomplishment, success of those that stayed behind. It's not the last time that this comes up in the Bible, and it's actually not the first time that it comes up in the Bible. Most obviously comes up in the Bible in the book of Samuel. At the end of the book of Samuel, chapter 30, David has gone to war. He has won a war with his men. He comes back with the spoils of war, and some of his men do not want to share the spoils of war. Simplifying here, David disagrees, and he makes it very clear that going out to war in that way, battling, is that for every person that goes is also the people that don't go. The people who, as he terms, who are quote-unquote sitting on the vessels, i.e. the people who stayed back, the people who watched your home, who provided security for your family while you went to war, people who kept the economy going while you were out at war, not to diminish your accomplishments and your success and your impact and your value out as a warrior, they also get to participate in the spoils of that war. David establishes it as a law, basically. It's the rule forever and ever. That's in chapter 30, verse 25. From now forward, this is the law and the rule of the people of Israel till this day. The commentaries there then bring up that this is rooted in not just what happens with the people of Israel in their battle with the Midianites, but actually goes all the way back to Abraham. And the famous episode with Abraham and going out to the battle of the 4 and the 5 kings that we've talked about way back in the early stages of year 1 of Coaching with the Bible. Abraham refuses to participate or to partake of the spoils of the war, but he does make sure that those who went to battle with him do benefit from it, and those who stayed back and literally sat on the vessel, were able to watch the camp so that the others could go to battle, they also should partake of the spoils. And so Abraham is being cognizant and mindful of giving credit where credit is due. Credit is due to all the people who participated in some way, shape, or form. That's the biblical root of it. I noticed it also this week. I think you hear it sometimes a lot in sports with teams, where certain athletes or certain players perhaps often get certainly more blame than they deserve, but often get more credit than they deserve for the success. And so perhaps they're the most recognizable, the most famous, maybe the most talented, maybe not. It's often very much the case that they're the leader of the team or the squad, and they get a lot of credit. And so this week, as there's every year around this time of year in mid-July, there's this award show that's sponsored by and run by and produced by ESPN, the Entertainment Sports Network. And they give out awards to best athletes and best teams and so on and so forth. And inevitably, the person who wins, like the best athlete, will get up and appreciate the recognition and the accomplishment, but will also recognize the team. It's not just about me, to use the term from Muhammad Ali, it's me, we. It's also about the we. They thank their teammates, the guys that make them look good, the guys that perform, the players who bring their A game if it's football on a Sunday. But beyond that, they'll thank the people who no one else notices. They'll thank the coaches, the trainers. They'll always thank their agents, but they'll thank a lot of people. They'll thank their families and, their spouses and their children. And they'll thank their parents who schlepped them to practices for all those years while they were little kids. And this is that moment as an opportunity in front of many other people to acknowledge everyone else and the role that they played in this success. Success is a village. It takes many people to get to those successes. And it's uber important that the people who are part of that success are given credit for their role and acknowledged, in many cases publicly perhaps, for the role that they played in that success. Rare, if ever, is the success simply done by an individual by himself or herself completely. And so it's important that we give credit. Now, in the context of our work and our lives in the space of business, in our homes, wherever that case may be, the value of it is actually measurable. So I came across an article in Forbes magazine that talked about the impact, for lack of a better term, on a team for giving other people credit. And so it measured leadership effectiveness and how leaders were viewed by their teams based on sort of the level at which the leader came across as giving credit to others, right? And so what ended up coming out of the article, and this is maybe a little bit of hyperbole, but basically the idea was that giving others credit, or all the credit, giving others all the credit gives back tenfold. Meaning, if you're you're in some cases, if it's hard for you to give other people credit, that's something we need to talk about and work on. We'll talk about that maybe. But if you're able to give other people credit, not just a little bit of the credit, like all the credit, you really take no credit for the success that is accomplished in that project, in that program, so then it pays itself back 10x. That's an amazing point. And what ends up happening is that the data suggests, and this is quoting from the article in Forbes, that by giving others credit, a leader will be perceived in the following ways: more effective in their overall leadership effectiveness, fairer, committed to helping others succeed, does what is best for the company, walks their talk, accepts responsibility, is trusted, lives their principles and core values, and values diversity. So the benefit to the leader, that which accrues to the leader who is cognizant, mindful, and executes on giving others all the credit, is enormous. But also the flip is that the impact that it has on the team and the people and their role in that success is vitally important. Appreciate the idea that in culture, in our society today, giving other people credit for the work that they've done, credit for their research and their writing and their publishing, we take that very seriously. Plagiarism is a serious issue. Certainly a more serious issue today with all these awesome generative AI technologies that are out there, but it was certainly an issue years ago, right? When it was simply just, there was all the information that was available, and it was very difficult for people to know what you had written and what you had plagiarized. But we take that very seriously. Citing sources is fundamental to any report, essay, research project that anyone has ever done. And when it's not cited properly, not only is it that you lose points, there's a potential of serious penalty involved in not citing the source. In Mishnaic literature, we have a statement that goes in the 6th chapter of the Ethics of the Fathers, in paragraph 6, when it talks about the 48 ways, talking about the 48 ways in which a person can acquire Torah knowledge, biblical knowledge, and really become a scholar. The last one that's listed is people saying the source of where they got their information. So if I heard it from X and Y and Z persons, and then when I'm sharing it in their name. And it goes a little bit further, that when a person shares in the name of the original source, that brings redemption to the world. It cites an example from Esther citing Mordecai in saving the king in the 2nd chapter of the book of Esther. So like really core, fundamental is our responsibility to give credit to the people who deserve it when they deserve it. And so we have to figure out the best ways to do that. Now, if you're concerned and you're not sure whether or not you're good at this, or whether or not this is something that comes to you naturally or doesn't, here's the following quick test. I saw this in an article on LinkedIn recently. Can you think of a time? Here's the question. Can you think of a time when you gave a person credit when you deserved it? I would modify it. Can you think of a time in the last 3 months that you gave a person credit for something when you, in fact, deserved the credit? If on the flip of that, you can think of a time recently where you took credit for something that belonged to someone else, then we got work to do. So that's, I think, a really good quick test of how we should think about this and what we can do about it. And so appreciate also that what the person is seeking, the person who deserves the credit, who needs the credit, who wants the credit, obviously they want some validation for the work that they did. They want the recognition sometimes simply from either their peers, their bosses, whoever it may be, their family members, spouses, children. They want that acknowledgement. It's meaningful. It's important to them. It's validating for all the effort that they put out there. But it also ties back to the level of risk, let's say, or the level of ownership and accountability that the person took upon themselves in accepting that project in the first place. And so not giving them that is effectively stealing it from them, which is what we think about when we think about the idea of plagiarism in general, or not giving people credit. It's a form of theft. If it's a person's original thoughts, and you're quoting them without quoting it by source, that's a version of theft. It's an intellectual theft. It's intellectual property, but it is a theft. And it's hurtful to the person who is not acknowledged for the work that they've done. If you've ever been in an experience, seen and sat in a room where someone took credit for your work, you know how hard that is to hear, or how painful it is. I remember one experience of my own. Years ago, I had an idea for something. I was working somewhere. I had an idea for a project or a program, and I shared it with people that I had answered to. They quickly dismissed it. And then at a meeting, not too distant after that in terms of time, they floated it as their own. You know how painful and hurtful that was? It corrupted and destroyed the respect relationship that in theory existed there. And so we can appreciate that when we do this, right? When we do this and we're good about giving other people credit, then what are we affecting within our team? We're building team, creating a sense of camaraderie and appreciation, celebration of success. We're breeding trust. We're building trust and loyalty. You know that's there. You're also, I think, building, people's sense and willingness to take on additional risk, motivating them and engaging them to do things that perhaps otherwise they wouldn't do because they know that you're there, you're out there for them, helping them on one level, but also acknowledging them for the work that they've done. Not just like quietly is good too, but publicly acknowledging the success and the impact that they've had. So it's really, really powerful to do in acknowledging people's work. Now, it does not require that it always be public. It doesn't need the entire team and the entire company finding that out. It can be private. It can be one-on-one. But the person has to sense and appreciate that that's true. Years ago when I taught high school, so one of the things that I learned from an early mentor was the opportunity in a classroom to catch somebody doing something right. It was in a book called The 1 Minute Manager that he shared with me, which I have somewhere on the shelf here. Catching someone doing something right and letting them know in very specific terms and acknowledging and giving them credit for what they had done that perhaps other people didn't notice is massively impactful and effective. The result of that will create in that person that sense of pride and appreciation, a sense of awareness that you're paying attention to when they do things right, and that you will give them credit for it. That will drive them and push them to do more. So public recognition is really important. And private recognition is also super important. So how do you do it as a person, as a leader, again, in home, at work, wherever it may be? I think there are ways to, with a team, to implement some sort of employee recognition. The company that I work at, they have that on a week-to-week basis. It was started by the CEO to try to create culture in the company, which I think really works beautifully, is one person acknowledging the qualities that another person brings to the team within the space of the company values, citing examples, citing the values that they bring to the table. And then what ends up typically happening is that other people sort of jump on top of that and heap on additional praise and additional accomplishments or additional anecdotes, and you create sort of an environment and a culture of celebration and accomplishment for the credit that people deserve for stuff that often goes done and gets done quietly and in private. With respect to you as the leader, you can keep an achievement journal, for lack of a better term. When someone does something right, acknowledge it. It doesn't have to wait a week until the team meeting or the company meeting. It doesn't have to wait a month. It doesn't have to be a quarterly superstar, although that's good too, because again, you're creating a good culture of credit and accomplishment and achievement. But it's really being mindful and paying attention to what's going on around you. Also, seek feedback from others. You might be missing out on stuff that's happening at a different level and a different layer in a project, in a program, or something that you're working on. And so speak to, quote unquote, middle level managers, but people that you're working with that are directly on the ground with those teams, and ask them for those anecdotes, for those moments. I would share one additional thing here. Too often we're going to rely on the result and not the effort. And so if the project stumbles, bumbles, and fumbles and fails, we might not in those spaces acknowledge people and give them credit for what they deserve and for the work that they did, even if it didn't succeed. We can't always control for the result. We can control for the effort and the standard of performance. And so acknowledge that in advance of the project. This is one that I adopted a number of years ago. So certain projects, I should do it more often. I really should. Certain projects, specifically the largest projects that I'm on, I try to put a message out to the entire team thanking all the participants who got us to the point of launch in advance of the project actually launching, and thanking them by name publicly for it. And the reason is again, I cannot control for the outcomes. I cannot control for the results, but I can appreciate the effort that went in and the effort that it took to get to that point. And when we do that, again, we create that culture. It obviously rolls back on us positively. Perhaps we're viewed as a better leader or whatever it may be, but we're also breeding good satisfaction and good retention among our team. We're creating, again, as I mentioned, loyalty and trust and appreciation among others. And this is how you build it. So you can maintain that log, but it's really important to share that spotlight. When we give all the credit to others, admittedly, I think for a lot of us, we can appreciate that it does shine back on us. But to end it with a quote, as we always do, here's how this is to be thought of. Credit is infinitely divisible. Give it away every chance you get, and there's always plenty left for you. So giving credit is super important. Constantly, consistently, and regularly find ways and opportunities to give people in your life the credit that they deserve, and sometimes more credit than they deserve. Instill in them the value of giving good credit and acknowledging and appreciating the good things that other people do for them, appreciating that their success and all of our success is collaborative and that it takes a village, and then know and believe deeply and realize for sure that that credit then shines back on you. That is Coaching with the Bible for this week. I do look forward to seeing you next week as we begin the 5th book of the 5 books of Moses. Take care.